everyone. Welcome back to the American Experiment podcast. My name is Grace Keating. I'm here with Kathryn Hinderaker.
Hello, everyone.
Episode 48. Woohoo.
Awesome.
Stay tuned. The second half of this episode is going to feature John Hinderaker talking with Cleta Mitchell, who is an election integrity lawyer. And they're going to get into kind of the 2024 election. How have election integrity laws improved since 2020? It's going to be really interesting, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Before we get into today's top stories, I did want to note this is officially our biggest year ever for Golden Turkey. We got more nominations than ever, got more votes than ever. I think this is the 6th or 7th award we're giving out, so this is a big deal.
Yeah, we can count on the trophy. We have a real trophy now.
We do.
1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 5 plus a lifetime achievement.
Yes.
So far.
Yes, for Southwest Light Rail. That unholy abomination. So if you haven't voted yet, please go do so. www.goldenturkeymn.com. The winner is going to be announced next Wednesday, November 27th, first by Joe Souchere on Garage Logic, and then via email to our subscribers. So go get your vote in. Stay tuned for that.
Okay, wait. Speaking of turkeys, I have a question for you, Grace.
Okay.
You need to settle an internal office debate we had yesterday, which was actually not an office debate. It was just my dad and me. But a good friend of the organization stopped by, and he dropped off some ducks for my dad, like from a duck hunt.
Like dead ducks. He brought them to the office?
I think so. Yeah.
Go on.
No, I think so. Like they've been killed. They're not live. He was like duck hunting.
Okay.
And my dad was like thrilled. He was like, I can't wait. We're gonna have you and Nicholas over to eat some duck. And I was like, oh my God, I am maybe a no on the duck, but like, sure, we'll come over. And he was like, why? Why not duck? And I was like, I don't know. I've never had duck. That's a little odd. And he was appalled. He was appalled that I'd never had duck. Has everyone else had duck? Have you had duck?
I've had duck once. I hate to say, yeah. I think it was in a soup or something. But it was like a fancy night out. I think Hunter wanted to try it. So
I would try it. But he was appalled I'd never had duck. And then he was like, his argument was, you like chicken? I was like, okay. You like turkey? Okay. And then he goes, and you like goose? What? Have you eaten goose? No. No one's eating goose. That
doesn't happen anymore.
What? You lost me. He had me. He was like chicken, turkey.
Yeah, like
points.
birds.
And then he threw in goose. Are people eating goose?
No.
Did he get it confused?
I didn't eat goose. People used to. Like, that was the Christmas. I feel like Christmas Carol, like that era, people ate. It was like a Christmas goose. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I was like, I've never even heard of this.
I don't think people do it that much anymore.
Oh,
at least not by choice. Like, I think if I was starving and I saw a goose in the woods, if I had to, I would, but I don't think people go and get a goose for Christmas anymore. Do they? Please tell us in the comments.
No. Maybe we're like city elitists or something. Or other people, Greater Minnesota, weigh in. Are you eating a lot of geese? I don't know. I felt very conflicted.
Oh my gosh. That is not where I expected that story to go. So have you had it yet? Have you had the duck yet?
We haven't had the duck. I don't know. I think maybe we're going to have it at some point. I'll report back if I get to try it.
I don't remember how
he was very excited
it tasted.
About fresh duck.
Wow.
I do have some kind of like childhood trauma. I feel like my dad grew up in South Dakota, and they would have pheasant, which is just like throw another bird into the mix.
Yeah,
that one, pheasant.
Another one I've never had.
But there'd always be this announcement before dinner, like make sure you watch out for the BB. Like the shot or whatever.
Oh my gosh!
And as a child, I was like, oh my God, frightening. Like I could just be biting down into like a bullet.
I have never once encountered that situation in my life. Like that is so far removed from the world that I live in. Like, I cannot even imagine.
I ate my grandma's homemade bread instead of the...
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was incredible.
That sounds so much better than pheasant.
Yeah, I don't know.
With bullets in it.
Yeah, right? Okay, I don't know. Other people, leave your comments. Are we like totally out of it? We grew up in the city.
Out of touch, yeah.
Are we out of touch with the normal people of the nation? Let us know. All right, Grace, first story.
Moving on. Trump is filling out his team right now after last week's election.
Oh, yeah.
So many new picks coming in. So many names I actually know, which is kind of a big deal. What do you think of the team that he's lining up?
Oh, my gosh, it's so interesting. Well, one of them, obviously, we have a Minnesota native, Pete Hegseth. So that's pretty cool. Local ties. Which one is he? Secretary of Defense, yeah, with his background in the military and everything. I mean, I think to me, these picks are great. They're people we know. They're people we've heard of, like you said.
Yeah.
And they're people that, I think he's doing that on purpose, people that have been loyal to him, because obviously his, the number one criticism I think conservatives had of Trump after his last time in office was like, oh, he picks some bad people. Some people that really led him in the wrong direction. And so I think this is great. I mean, obviously, we'll see how they do. But I think there were some very interesting picks. I love, like, RFK Jr. is so interesting, too.
So
obviously.
interesting.
And so he's like HHS. And all of these people, I think, for the most part, have to be confirmed by the Senate, right? So that's not official. But
yeah. Most of them, yeah. Yep.
The liberals freaking out about RFK Jr. is definitely one of my favorites because I just saw, like, in 2008, Obama, it was said, was going to appoint him to totally different. I think it was EPA director, but Obama, like,
it's so
so interesting. And now they're freaking out about, oh my God, RFK Jr.
Like, he's gone to the dark side.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Oh, it's so interesting.
So I kind of like this coalition that's formed. Tulsi Gabbard obviously is another similar person like that.
Past speaker of ours, I think it was 2022.
Yeah.
We got her,
Oh my
I
God,
think
she
it
was
was
amazing.
the week after she announced she was leaving the Democratic
Yeah,
Party.
it was quite
the
amazing.
timing was incredible.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool. Marco Rubio, I think he's great. Elise Stefanik, Lee Zeldin, Doug Burgum.
Oh, yeah, Doug Burgum, North Dakota.
Yeah.
Former North Dakota governor.
Sean Duffy, he was on The Real World.
Yeah, he was from Wisconsin. Okay, so he's from the same hometown that my mom grew up in.
Oh my gosh, cool.
So, like, yeah, his brother was just at my wedding a few months ago. It's pretty funny. The
that is
Duffys
funny.
are cool, so yeah.
They're
Excited,
great. They have
excited
like
for
a
Sean.
million children too.
Yeah, I think he has like 9 kids, maybe more.
That's very cool. Yeah, and they met
Yeah.
on MTV. So cute.
So interesting, yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I think I still have a lot of like questions about the whole, like the Make America Healthy Again thing. I think is very interesting that
Yeah.
Robert F. Kennedy has kind of done. I feel like I have some reservations, but I'm also interested.
I'm completely open to basically anything that they put out. Like, I'm not gonna like jump in
Yeah.
without thinking and evaluating, but like I'm just so ready for someone who's gonna like change up the entire administration and like
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
industry, like
the system.
I
and
think
how
there's
we
so
eat
much
our
bad
food
there
and things
Yeah.
like that. Is there anything you've done personally as a result of like the Make America Healthy Again thing? Like, have you changed anything in your life? Like, I recently swapped out all of we had like cheap plastic, like, what's the word? Utensils for stirring pasta and stuff like that, like big spoons,
yeah.
like ladles,
Yeah,
and things
yeah.
like that. They were plastic. Like
Yeah, mine
Room
are.
Essentials from Target. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Are they bad? Should
I don't
not
know.
use
They're
them?
like the tips were melted, and I was
Oh,
like,
mine have done that. Yeah, is that bad? That's probably bad.
you're ingesting microplastics. I don't know. I went and I kind of like looked into it, and then it was like, oh, wood, you could get germs. So I decided on
yeah.
silicone.
Oh, interesting.
And so I replaced my stuff with silicone. But that was kind of a microplastics little rabbit hole I went down. I don't know
Okay.
like how concerned I'm supposed to be about microplastics. I'm not super, but I
Do
also
they give you
replaced our
cancer?
salt.
Is that what it is with microplastics? Like, what do they do?
Okay, I listened to approximately 35% of a Huberman episode about this, and
So like you get the end result, but maybe like not.
So here's what I learned. That was like an hour, by the way, of the microplastics thing he did.
Holy cow!
And it can like they found in cadavers chunks of plastic in their brain.
Oh my gosh.
Is how I think he said it more like eloquently than that, but that was my takeaway. So basically, it's not quite clear. He's like a brain doctor, if you will.
Okay.
And so his perspective was how it affects kind of like your neurological system and some concerns about that. They don't know for sure, but he's saying obviously if there's pieces of plastic building up in your brain, then that's bad.
That seems bad.
But
that
you
seems
also,
definitely
like,
bad.
excrete a lot of plastics and things like that too. So there's like you can't get too stressed about it. Was his main takeaway.
Okay.
Sorry,
I'm a little concerned now. I guess I don't know.
cutting boards.
I
are
don't want to
next
get rid
for
of
me.
them. What? No. You're gonna make me replace my whole kitchen.
I know it's too expensive. You simply can't.
That's so true.
Don't look up like Tefal or any of those. Like, do you have a non-stick pan?
I think
Yeah, don't Google it.
I'm not gonna. I
Okay.
can't replace my pans. Pans are expensive.
I know it's too expensive. To
I don't want
replace
what I know can't hurt me. What I don't know can't hurt me.
exactly. Okay.
Oh,
That's true.
but Make America Healthy Again, I have not made any big changes yet. My mom's really trying to get me off seed oils, which I think is part of that movement. I think you've maybe talked about this before.
Yeah, I have. It's really hard to do.
Is it really? But you're allergic to some, aren't you?
Well, no, I'm allergic to sesame. So,
Okay, so
like,
that'd
I
be-
avoid
okay.
some oil. It's already, like, I'm kind of careful about what I eat from food allergies.
Sure.
But, like, the seed oils thing is hard because if you go to a restaurant, you're probably eating seed oils,
Yeah.
A lot of stuff.
You can't
Or, I mean,
control it if you're out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in your house, like I'm just careful about what I eat more so in my house and what I use when I'm cooking at home. And then I have to decide like, okay, when I go out, I'm not going to like not have like wings or
Yeah.
something because they're like fried in seed oil. That's just going to
Limits.
happen.
There's definitely,
you have
like-
to. You have to figure out where your line is, and so I just try not to worry about it if I'm going out. That's already something I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's like extra for fun, and then
Yeah.
more careful about what I use at home. But yeah, seed oils. That's an interesting one. We'll see. I'm excited. I think there could be big changes, which could be interesting. And like I don't know. I'm just interested to see what happens.
I am too. We should move on. That was such a fun rabbit hole. Oh my gosh.
Forever.
I know. This could be a weekly segment. This could be like, what did you change this week?
Yeah, what did you change this week?
What did RFK Jr. make you
salt.
change?
Salt was the other thing I
Salt?
changed. Yeah, because sea salt. Oh my god!
Someone
is gonna bring up the Huberman podcast and be like, "This is so dense." But no, sea salt. There's a lot of garbage in the sea, and they get the salt from the sea.
Yeah.
So he was saying better to just go get Himalayan salt from the mountains where they're not like storing all this garbage.
What? Okay, so like my little Morton iodized salt would maybe not be good.
That might be fine. No,
that might be fine.
It's like the sea salt. It's specifically sea salt grinders. I didn't throw away mine of the Morton thing. Because I think that is different.
Okay.
Oh my god, no! Like someone's gonna listen to this who actually knows what they're talking about.
Don't take any of our advice. Neither we're gonna be doctors.
Yeah. Okay, Himalayan sea salt. That's what I did.
Okay.
I changed out my sea salt grinder for a Himalayan.
Okay, I can deal with that. That seems doable. At least.
Yeah,
like
I felt
seed
that
oils
was
is like there's a scale of like how much effort I can.
Yeah, exactly.
Put in. Moving on, Minnesota should lift its ban on new nuclear power.
Yeah.
Not a controversial statement, I think, and yet somehow. It kind of is.
It's weird. They have these like insane energy goals, but they refuse to bring nuclear into the discussion, which is interesting. They don't even want to talk about it really. It's just so strange to me. It's like they have these goals that they're not really intent on solving.
Well, it's I'm sorry, it's like classic liberal worldview. It's looking at the outcomes and not at how you get there.
Yeah, right.
It's fantasy over reality.
Yeah.
I had no idea the history of Minnesota's ban on new nuclear power. We were just talking about this.
Yeah.
It's a 1994 law, so it's like 30 years ago. That it was like this deal that Xcel Energy worked out, and so all of these wind and solar interest groups like got the state to ban new nuclear power so they could have this monopoly for green energy.
Right.
I had no idea. That's insane.
I know. It is crazy how much like those people now, I think especially on the left, talk about like corporate interests and things like that, about how worried they are.
Yeah.
Never did they talk about it in terms of energy.
No, it's very one-sided.
Exactly. There's like a huge corporate interest here in doing these kind of green energy things. They get so many subsidies, so much government money to do these green energy initiatives that are completely inefficient and cost the taxpayer and the user of energy way more. So
yeah. Yep. And then, it's insane. And even like this is a post from Bill Glahn. He was saying like ending the ban, if that happens this upcoming session, it won't usher in a rush of new plants. Like any proposal would have to go through a like extensive vetting. There's all these environmental regulations to get through. Like there are checks in place. Lifting this ban would not mean that like every city is putting up a nuclear power plant, you know, on every street corner or something. I don't know. It's interesting. It'll be fun to see again if a big change like this, which could change the lives of so many people in Minnesota, lower energy costs. Yeah. Could that happen in the next year? I don't know. It'll be interesting.
It'd be huge. The corporate interests are still just like so big and so powerful. So we'll find out. But one thing that I was just working on one of our mailers, and I love talking about how other big, unions, corporate special interests, all these people have like lobbyists at the Capitol, right? And like who's lobbying for Americans? Oh, sorry, I ran into my mic. Who is lobbying for Americans? And it's us. I mean, we talk about what is best for the consumer.
Yeah.
Peter Nelson talks about this a lot too when it comes to healthcare. Like every person involved in healthcare, every entity involved in healthcare has like lobbyists, powerful people fighting for them, except for the consumer, the people who need the healthcare. Yeah. And so he really sees his job as like advocating for consumers. And I love that that's what we do here. It's my favorite thing about working here.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. This Thursday is Give to the Max Day. Please go to AmericanExperiment.org. You'll be getting emails from us. There should be a pop-up on our website, but we couldn't do anything that we do here at American Experiment without you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge day. And a lot of Give to the Max Day is focused on nonprofits in Minnesota. And there's, a lot of places your money can go and a lot of people asking you for money. But if you want to give it to a conservative organization that advocates for you, we're here to do that. And so we would appreciate it. And we're really we're supported by people in small amounts of money giving what they can. Like we're not we really do advocate for people. And so if you have, $10 that you can give to support us this year, that would be incredible. We so appreciate it.
I mean, I think our median donation is what, like $25, $50 maybe?
Yeah, I think it's about 50 usually.
I mean, that's incredible. That's so abnormal.
50.
I mean, you know better than I am. Yeah. Than I do, development director. But I mean, that is not normal for nonprofit.
Super, super rare. Which is, we love. It's a great thing to be a grassroots organization, an activist organization. We don't just write policy and talk about, big topics. We make sure that people understand them and people understand what we're working on. And the citizens are knowledgeable about what's happening in St. Paul about what's happening with them in DC and how it affects them. I think a lot of organizations focus on, like we've talked about, corporations, special interests, things like that. We really try and focus on the consumer, the Minnesotan, in our case. So.
Yeah. As it should be.
Yeah.
Someone should be out there.
Thank you guys for listening. If you're listening to our podcast.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our final story for this week, you may have seen already. It was Keith Ellison, Minnesota's Attorney General, shutting down a nonprofit that was founded by a Minneapolis City Council member's spouse. And like somehow the City Council member has not had to answer like any questions about this.
No, and like nothing's happened. I think he just told them that they had to dissolve the nonprofit, right? The fraudulent nonprofit.
Yeah.
They've stolen like $500,000 in taxpayer money, and they're just being asked to dissolve it. So I don't know, is anyone going to face charges, anything like that? I think it remains to be seen, but not so far.
Yeah, not yet. And just like, again, the total lack, I would say, of like media attention. Up until now, I will say, Bill Glahn had a great spot on KARE 11 about this. So finally there are some news outlets asking the right questions, but it has taken way too long to get to this point. It was founded as a food charity back in November 2020. So right when all of these like COVID era nonprofits were popping up, trying to get at the federal COVID aid money that was coming down. And, okay, this is interesting. So the agreement to dissolve the charity was executed back on October 28th, but it was not made public until November 8th. I wonder why that could be. Not to be a little conspiracy theorist, but could something have been happening
between
those dates?
That's a thinker.
Interesting.
Yeah, okay, the other thing, if you're ever just like, want some entertainment, go look up clips of like the Minneapolis City Council or the St. Paul City Council. Both equally wackazoo. Like, it's so funny. I mean, you'll get depressed, obviously, because these people have like some small amount of power, but like,
I think it just gets sad.
So amusing. I mean, the things, whenever I see a clip pop up on my ex, I'm like, okay, watch immediately. It's going to be hilarious. The people, it's run by completely unserious people, and they do things like notice when a scam opportunity comes up, and they tell their wife, you know, okay, allegation, but what it looks like is that they tell your wife, here's a good opportunity to take $500,000 of taxpayer money with clearly no consequences.
Yeah, it's go years without any media questions. Now they're getting dissolved. But like, they also the story points out, like they have pending unpaid invoices with the State Department of Education. So if they get dissolved, what happens to that money? Nothing?
Yeah, and what if this happens in the future, what's going to stop people? I mean, there's no consequences. That's what we see across every like sector of, crime and criminal behavior right now, even, normal crime on the streets. You see like no consequences. Why would people not do it?
Yeah. It has far-reaching effects, I would say.
Yeah.
So we'll see where this ends up.
Well, I will jump into our final segment, which is something Kathryn found interesting on Twitter X this week.
My favorite segment.
Okay, this is a Dean Phillips tweet. Dean Phillips, do you remember him?
Yeah, vaguely.
Okay, he was like the congressman representing the 5th district in Minnesota, which is like Eden Prairie area. It's 5, right? I always get 5 and 3 confused. Is it 3? 5. I'm getting a 5 from behind. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Isaac. So he basically quit being that congressman and decided to run for president, like before it was okay to say that Joe Biden was senile.
Yeah.
So now he's kind of like been pushed out of the Democrat Party, I would say, because he was like too early. They were like, no, Joe Biden's fine. They were still saying he was fine at this time. They ended Dean Phillips' career and said, no, Joe Biden's fine. Of course, they ended up having to,
swap him out.
Disastrous debate performance. Dean Phillips kind of ended up being right. And so I think now he's a little bit salty about his political career being over when he was pretty much right in the beginning. Anyway, what he's tweeting about today is Nancy Mace introduced this bill to bar trans women from the Capitol restrooms. This happened because this is the first time that a trans individual, it is a man who is acting as a woman. It's the first time a trans individual has been elected to Congress, U.S. Congress.
Okay.
So she wants to introduce this bill so that this man cannot enter the women's bathrooms.
Okay.
Dean Phillips says, pathetic. What are you scared of, Nancy? Why wouldn't we allow our fellow citizens the right to use the damn toilet of the gender by which they live their lives? You may not like it, I get it, but it's still common sense, and banning it seems un-American. So come on, patriots, let's be cool with one another.
Well, he sounds hip and cool.
Oh my God.
Let's just be cool with one another.
I'm so freaking sick of being gaslit Is gaslit the right use? The right use of gaslit? I don't know. I'm sick of being gaslit about this issue. Like, how come you don't want men in your bathroom, you loser women? What? And then it goes to common sense. Look at this. It's common sense to allow individuals of the other sex in your bathroom. That's common sense, Dean Phillips. That's common sense. This dude, his whole life was like, I'm a moderate. I'm Dean Phillips, the moderate representing, District 5. No, you're not. That is the most radical thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
That you don't believe in gender. You don't believe women should have spaces where they can be safe. That you what? I'm sorry. This is insane to me.
No, I'm with you. And he says, like, you may not like it. I get it. But it's still common. Like, okay, either you understand why this is weird, you understand that there's a problem with this, or you don't. You can't say like, I get why you're upset, and also you're stupid for being upset.
Right.
You can't do both.
Come on, let's be cool. No, I'd rather be safe in bathrooms. I'd rather have women and men and spaces that they can go.
Yeah.
And there are other alternatives to this. Like, look, there probably should be like individual bathrooms in places like, the Capitol, say, or where they're going to be,
like a single stall situation.
Yeah, like a single bathroom or something. That's a great idea for a number of reasons. Dads with kids of a different gender, moms with kids of a different gender, people with disabilities, people like all kinds of things. Great. I would be so in favor of places implementing those kind of bathrooms so that everyone has a place to go. Don't have to worry about it. Men cannot go into women's bathrooms.
Yeah, as long as it's like an addition and it's not supplementing the bathrooms that already. Like, you still need to have women only spaces, men only spaces, and then a third option for like those, like special circumstances.
Because where does this end? Like, if I'm in the locker room at a fitness club and there are men in there where we're all changing, that's not okay. I feel unsafe. I feel uncomfortable. Where does it end?
And like we always say, where are the feminists? Where are the feminists protecting women in women-only spaces?
The whole point of the protection of women, as like J.K. Rowling will talk about this a lot, the whole point was that women are inherently more vulnerable than men in a lot of ways. We're built to be smaller. We're built to be more vulnerable. And as a society, we need to protect them more because of that.
Which has always been a no-brainer.
Yeah,
like for thousands of years,
Title
that's been a
IX
no-brainer.
and things like that to give women fairness when it comes to sports. And now liberals are the ones who want to get rid of all
Just
that.
dismantling that piece by piece.
And the idea that he has the audacity to say that it is common sense.
Yeah.
It's common sense to allow men wearing women's clothing in the women's bathroom.
Like now that you've decided this in the last 20 years or whatever. Now it's common sense.
It's common sense.
Get with the times, you
It's
loser.
cool.
Like, oh my gosh.
It's not cool. It's not cool, Dean Phillips. And I'm over it. I'm sick of being gaslit on that subject.
Amen. Well, guys,
that's all I got for today.
Thanks for joining us this week. Let's kick it over to John and Cleta talking about election integrity issues. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. American Experiment is supported by thousands of individuals like you. To join the movement, go to www.americanexperiment.org and click the yellow donate button. From all of us here, thank you.
Well, I'm John Hinderaker, and we are joined today by Cleta Mitchell. Cleta is an old friend who for many years was really the top lawyer in the United States representing conservative nonprofits, including Center of the American Experiment. And in recent years, Cleta's efforts have been focused on election integrity, among other things being the founder of the Election Integrity Network. Cleta, let's just talk briefly about how you got your start, how you came to kind of specialize in election integrity.
Well, okay. It's so nice to see you and be with you, John. You're always a favorite, and you forgot to tell them that I was once your lawyer. Well, I guess you did say that, didn't you? But I've always been so proud to be to have associated with, in a little small part, with the center. But look, my law practice for many years was what I call political law. It is the regulation and support of the business, politics and policy, which includes nonprofit advocacy organizations, research organizations. And I was always very blessed to be able to represent organizations and individuals with whom I share values and a worldview. And the panoply of issues in political law includes not only the nonprofit work, and you may remember I represented a number of the conservative groups targeted by the IRS back there, the IRS targeting the Tea Party groups under Lois Lerner and the Obama administration. And I've represented a lot of candidates, political candidates, and campaigns over the years, and have, as part of that, I had expertise in campaign finance, both state and federal, and in the election laws, just like I said, the business and regulation of politics and policy. And so I was a volunteer attorney for President Trump. Following the 2020 election, I was asked to go to Georgia, and I had been involved in election law for many years, and certainly done my time at county election board offices and all over the years. But I really saw, like many, many Americans, things that happened on election night in 2020. And then on the day after the election, things were different than they'd been when people went to bed. And so for the first time, there were just literally tens of thousands of people who sort of said, there's something going on here. We don't know what it is, but it doesn't seem right. And I've been involved with a number of different movements. I was involved in the term limits movement, for instance. That's why I moved originally to Washington, D.C. I was a lawyer for the national term limits movement, where there were initiatives and efforts all over the country to limit the terms of members of Congress. And so I know that one of the things that is very important in any movement is that people get really engaged at the beginning, or they're upset about something, or there's the Tea Party or whatever. If you do not create a structure and infrastructure, that energy can dissipate without accomplishing anything. And so what I set about to do in 2021 was to create, I wrote a handbook called The Citizen's Guide to Building an Election Integrity Infrastructure. And just all of the things that if you want to be involved in your elections, which I believe citizens need to be, the system was designed to have citizen engagement and oversight. And so I published this handbook, and it's on our website, whoscounting.us is the name of the website. And you can download it for free. And it talks about how to build a local election integrity task force, how to have a state coalition, what are the areas that people need to become involved in and know about in order to oversee the elections. Remember, all voting, for the most part, all voting is local. And so we published, the idea was to train and equip citizens with the ability to get involved in their local election offices, to see what was going on, to ask the questions, and to be a presence there. Because I'll tell you, John, the thing that is really clear to so many, many hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people over the last almost 4 years, as people have gotten involved with this effort, they go to an election board meeting, and guess who's there? Well, it's the League of Women Voters. It's the local NAACP, or the one of the other leftist voting groups. And they've been there for a long time. Our side hasn't been there until the last 3.5 years. So it's really important to have that citizen engagement. We have, I think, 20 or 21 training videos that are free at our website, where people can download. And the whole point is to make citizens knowledgeable and experts, really, in what their state election laws are and how those state laws interact with the federal laws. And so we really do have now an army of literally thousands of volunteers all over the country who are experts in various components of election law. And I think that presence has made a huge difference, because prior to 2020, nobody even thought there was such a thing. Since 2020, people have been engaged, and I think it paid off in 2024 in a lot of ways, because people were there watching. And it's a lot harder to do bad things if they know, if people who want to do those bad things know that they're going to be observed and watched. And so I think that that's something I think I'm very proud of, all the work that so many people, thousands, tens of thousands of volunteer hours by many people over the last 3.5 years. It's been pretty amazing.
So without going back and reliving the entire 2020 experience, which is maybe a conversation for a different day, what are some of the areas, some of the main areas of vulnerability in our electoral system that you and others identified following the 2020 election?
Well, I think one of the number one things that people have been engaged in has been looking at the voter rolls. The voter rolls, voter registration lists. Remember, federal law requires every state to have a computerized statewide voter registration list. The only state that's exempt from that is North Dakota, because they don't have voter registration, but they do have a list of sorts. So, but federal law requires that there be that list. It requires that no one can be added to the list unless their identity and their residency is verified. But there's another federal law that makes it impossible, virtually impossible, to remove bad registrations that were never valid in the first place. And I think one of the number one frustrations of the volunteers across the country, because another thing that we set up starting in 2023 are national working groups. You know, I thank COVID for this one thing. People have learned how to work via Zoom. And we probably couldn't have done all the things that we've done over the last 3.5 years if were it not for the fact that people became accustomed to not meeting in person, so that we could build a national network in all these different areas. And one of the things we've done is we have all of these national working groups on various aspects of election integrity. So we have a national working group on voter rolls. We have a national working group on election technology. We have a national working group on only citizens vote. We have a national working group on protecting vulnerable voters. We have a national working group on voting by mail, understanding the interaction between the U.S. Postal Service and voting by mail. And in every one of these instances, I think, you know, people have found all the problems in the system. And the reason there are problems in the system is because the left has been focused on this for a good long while conservatives have not. Conservatives historically do not pay attention to what I call the political process issues. Our people are worried about taxes and school choice and healthcare and all of those kinds of fundamental substantive issues and principles. But as you know, John, being a lawyer, when you go to law school, you have subject matter by classes, whether it's, criminal law, but you also have criminal procedure. You have civil procedure. You have evidence. You have these, what is the process for being a lawyer, trying a lawsuit, et cetera? And it's almost like conservatives only have studied part of the curriculum, the subject matter, but they haven't studied the procedures. And you and I both know that you can get tossed out of court on standing or other procedural matters. You can have the best lawsuit, the best facts, the best evidence, the best witnesses. But if you get the procedure wrong, you cannot get your day in court. And that's kind of the way
Cleta, when I was a lawyer, I would have said that I was not an expert in any area of the law except how to win lawsuits.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
That's what I'm saying. And the left has devoted, Capital Research Center estimates that starting around 2011, 2012, right around the time of Obama's reelection, that since that time, the left has raised and spent between 11 and 14 billion dollars changing our election system. And that covers everything from the statutory changes that they've made all over the country have wrecked our election system. And the left understands how if you can manipulate the way people vote, you will manipulate the outcome. You can impact the outcome. Why do you think it was that when the Minnesota legislature was flipped in 2022 from Republican control to Democrat control. What were the first bills that passed that legislature? Do you remember? They were election laws.
It's hard to remember what came first.
It was the election laws were first. They start with the procedure. And so they do that because they think they can control the outcome of the elections if they can. That's why they spent so much money on things like the census, why they spent so much money on things like redistricting. And they just keep tweaking. And campaign finance. Think of all the campaign finance laws in Minnesota that the left has written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. It's all this process, political process. So I think that some of the things that people have found, I think the number one thing has been the problems of the voter rolls, the problems of failure to ensure that people are eligible to vote when they register and then when they vote, when they cast a vote. And that's particularly true with voting by mail. I call that unsupervised voting because all the protections that exist against political campaign activity within so many feet of the polls, the prohibitions on pressuring somebody and really allowing them to have a secret ballot. So all of those go away when you have vote by mail. And so it's a collective versus an individual process that way. And so the left has spent a lot of money changing the way we vote. And certainly we found so many problems in the system. It's going to take a while to
one of the things
to right that ship.
One of the tools that the left has used with respect to voting by mail is collusive litigation. And I know in 2020, yes, Minnesota was one of, I think, 12 or 15 states that had Democratic secretaries of state. And in our state, the DFL party found two sets of plaintiffs, 3 in each set, and they started 2 lawsuits, one in state court and one in federal court. And the lawsuits were identical. They alleged that because of COVID, the requirement of a witness signature on a mail-in ballot had to be suspended for the 2020 election. And they brought those lawsuits setting the Democratic Secretary of State, Steve Simon, and within about 48 hours, he agreed to, quote, settle those lawsuits by changing election law in Minnesota in a way that he had no constitutional authority to do. Right. He doesn't have any authority to dispense with the statutory requirement of a witness signature on a mail-in ballot, but in the guise of settling a lawsuit, that's what he did. And so the settlement came on for approval. It was objected to by the Republican Party in both courts. The federal judge refused to approve the settlement, said, no, this looks like it's collusive. There's no showing here. I'm not going to approve it. But because they had 2 different sets of plaintiffs, they got 2 bites at the apple. And in the state court judge said, oh, yeah, looks good to me. He approved the settlement. And so in 2020, there was no requirement of a witness signature, which is really the only speed bump that we have in Minnesota, protecting against voter fraud when it comes to mail-in ballots. So I think that's a great example. They did that in a number of states, making a procedural change that just made it that much easier for people to break the rules.
Well, I can tell you things that happened in 2020 around COVID. And, it's that old Rahm Emanuel, never let an emergency go to waste. So there had been Mark Elias, he's the Democrats' big lawyer. He had filed by May of 2019. He had already filed. He and all these different left-wing organizations had filed lawsuits all over the country about various aspects of election law because they couldn't get passed in Congress the changes that they wanted to make after the Democrats took control in 2019. Their HR 1, it's always the number one bill that they try to pass, they could not pass the Senate, passed the House, didn't pass the Senate. So they started filing lawsuits around the country to try to have state statutes invalidated. And they'd filed many suits by May of 2019, such that I got 2 people to go with me, 2 lawyers you probably know, Hans von Spakovsky and J. Christian Adams. We've been working on election law issues for a number of years. And I organized a meeting with the lawyers for the Trump campaign, the Trump 2020 campaign, and we laid out for them, look at all these lawsuits that are being filed. They're upending the election codes of the different states. You've got to pay attention to this. This is May of 2019. And the Trump campaign lawyers were just kind of, pat us on the head. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And, really didn't do anything about it. Well, then fast forward, once COVID came in, everything shifted. Now COVID became a wonderful pretext to get done what they've been trying to do already for at least a year. And so it wasn't really until almost May of 2020 that finally the RNC and the Trump campaign started beginning to push back a little bit. And one of the things that happened this cycle that had not happened in 2020 is that the RNC in particular was very engaged in immediately going at and trying to enforce the law where it wasn't being enforced, and to fight efforts by these left-wing groups to change the election procedures. And it's just an ongoing battle. But I can give you a couple of other interesting examples of things that happened because of COVID in 2020 that did not happen in 2024, and it made a big difference. In Pennsylvania, you mentioned what happened in Minnesota with the witness signature on the absentee ballots. In Pennsylvania, the Secretary of State issued a memorandum in September of 2020. This is a Democrat Secretary of State because the Secretary of State, the chief election official, is appointed by the governor. And so the Democrat Secretary of State sent a memo to all of the counties telling them because of COVID, they were just to waive the signature requirement of the voter. It wasn't even a witness. It was the signature requirement of the voter so that that signature could be matched to the signature on the voter list. And of course, the Trump campaign, RNC sued, and the lower court agreed because it's black letter law. That went up to the Democrat-controlled state Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, who said, "Oh no, because of COVID, we're going to waive that requirement." I always used to say, "Gee, I did not know that one of the symptoms of COVID was that you lost your ability to sign your name." But in Georgia, yeah,
go ahead.
Well, in Georgia, the Secretary of State, with no authority whatsoever, this is a Republican Secretary of State, with no authority, sent to every voter on the active voter list in Georgia. Now, that's when you get into real problems because with the voter rolls, because there are hundreds of thousands of bad registrations. But he sent an absentee ballot application to everyone on the voter rolls, which is not legal in Georgia. And that ended up being the cause of great consternation because there were these hundreds of thousands of people who voted by mail. There was the ACLU was admitted into offices around the state to help train local officials as to basically how not to match signatures. And that wasn't present in 2024. And in Pennsylvania, it wasn't present in 2024. So those are things that made a difference.
Let me pause you there for a moment, Cleta, because that's really what I want to talk about next. And that is things have gotten better, right? I mean, between 20 and 24, we've talked about, you talked about your volunteer efforts, the network of thousands of volunteers that have now gotten active, gotten involved. Now, my sense, you correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my sense is the RNC has gotten involved, has done a better job. Talk about that. Some of the efforts that have been made since 2020 to try to clean up the system and make it more reliable.
Well, you said it. I mean, the fact that there are all these volunteers around the country getting involved in their local election offices, really starting in 2021, all the way through to 2022 and 2023 and this year, developing real expertise. And the RNC did get involved. The RNC said that it wasn't involved. The argument that they gave for having not been involved was that they were under a consent decree with the Democrats in a case going back to, I think, the early 80s, where they were not supposed to engage in voter fraud protection, something like that. But, look, whether that was the reason or not the reason, the point was that they were not there. They had no programs whatsoever to try to address the issues, even though most states have requirements in their state statutes for observers from both parties or all political parties. Some states say candidates can have observers, and they just have never done anything like that. And so in 2021, in August of 2021, the RNC set up an election integrity unit, and they hired people and and recruited people. We worked very closely with them. We tried to work with the Democrats. Interestingly, I've sent multiple letters to the DNC, but never have gotten a response saying, because we're a 501c3 and we would train people, and then it would be up to the individual after they would be trained and what observers do and what to look for, whether they were going to be deployed by the Democrats or Republicans. And we just never had any luck with the Democrats. But the RNC had a pretty robust program 2 years ago, and then they replicated that this year, having observers and volunteer poll observers and poll watchers, and getting people into poll worker positions as required by law, because like in Detroit and many places, the law says you have to have parity between Democrats and Republicans. And Detroit's idea of parity was 80 Republicans and 5,200 Democrats. So the RNC sued in a number of jurisdictions about those failure to meet the parity responsibilities. And, but I will have to hand it to them. The RNC filed a lot of lawsuits. Now, some of them I didn't think were the greatest suits, but what difference does it make? I think that, they served notice that they were not going to just roll over. And that was a big change over the last 2022 and 2024. This year, the RNC, I think the last count was they filed 130 cases. At some point, I thought they were filing cases just to run up the numbers. It made a difference because it's an area our side has never actually fought back. I think we still have a lot of work to do to be more aggressive. And I always like to say, the rule should be WWDD. What would the Democrats do? And we need to be as firm and as aggressive as they are, but made huge progress. And I think that made a huge difference in what happened, at least in the presidential election. There are a lot of problems, I think, with some of the other offices and other ways the elections were run, but we made huge progress in many, many ways. Very tiny, granular things that have a big impact.
Well, Cleta, I think this is kind of an untold story. I think it's a success story. I think you are one of a number of people that deserve a lot of credit for it. And I think it's great for people to understand that progress has been made, and our elections are, goodness knows, imperfect, but significantly better. So how would you overall evaluate the 2020 election? Obviously not perfect. Some weaknesses remain, but how would you overall evaluate the integrity of the 2024 election?
Well, like I said, I think, one of the things President Trump kept saying on the campaign trail is you have to have big turnout. You have to vote early. And because we had to get numbers into the election, bank the vote, whatever they call that. But we had to get those Republican votes into the election office. And one of the reasons for that is that it made it, by the fact that there were so many people who got engaged and voted early, it made it possible to the election offices could not just manipulate the outcome. And I will tell you, there are a lot of election offices around the country, particularly in big cities, where they really do manipulate the outcome. But I think that made a difference. And I also think the president kept saying it has to be too big to rig. And when you have margins that are big enough, again, it is harder to manipulate the outcome. But so I would give us, I'd say we had a B+ in terms of overall, but nationally. In some states, I would give some states a D or a D-. because there are still too many problems in the way the election is conducted. And I can just give you an example today. In North Carolina, today is the day of filing a vote when voter challenges are heard, where citizens, because they've been studying the voter rolls, they can see who voted, and they can check, they can do research about that person. They can find out, well, this person is dead, the person voted. This person is dead, the person voted. This person has been convicted of felony. And I know of one little county that in Western North Carolina, all the election boards are controlled by the party of the governor. So in North Carolina, that means all the election boards are controlled by the Democrats. And so their citizens group went in, filed challenges to 4 ballots that have been cast, and they said they should not have been cast. They should not be counted. Those were sequestered. They should not be counted because there were 2 dead, 1 felon, and I can't remember the other one. The other one moved out of state. The election board voted to count all 4 of them. Now that's pretty crazy, but those are the kinds of things that we really still need to fix. We need to have more transparency. We know we need to change some of the federal laws. There are 3 or 4 federal laws that have been governing our elections for the past 3 decades, and it's time that Congress took a good hard look at those statutes, upgrade and modernize them, address some of the issues that we've learned about over the last several years. And I think that, I'm really hoping that the Republican Congress will address some of those issues, because there's a way for us to secure the elections for years to come and to make sure that we have integrity. And so that's going to be the next phase, I think, of the election integrity movement. We call it our Title 52 project. All of the federal statutes are in Title 52. And we want to identify and show the examples of where the problems are. One of the big problems is making sure that non-citizens are not on the voter rolls and not being allowed to vote. That's a very porous system that we need to fix. And there are a number of things like that. But I'm very hopeful that all the attention and the fact that people now, maybe the conservatives will start to realize that if you protect the process, it can help with the policy outcomes. That's how the left thinks. We need to think that way too.
The American people want honest elections. You see this in polls over and over. We polled election integrity for the fall 2024 issue of Thinking Minnesota, our quarterly magazine, which I know you're familiar with, and it was very interesting. I mean, overwhelmingly, if you ask about voter ID, for example, which is kind of a proxy, I think, for wanting integrity in the election process, overwhelming majorities, even most Democrats, say,
That's
yes,
right.
we want honest elections. And yet in our state, we've got a situation where I believe we are the only state that has same-day registration, but does not have provisional voting. So if you show up at a poll and you say, I want to vote, and they say, well, do you live in this precinct? Oh, yeah, I live in the precinct. Do you have some identification? Do you have anything that shows that you are a legitimate voter in this precinct? No, I really don't. You can be vouched for. Someone could say, oh, yeah, I know Fred. Yeah, Fred lives in the precinct. He's good. They'll give you a ballot, and your ballot goes into the machine. Well, then the process is that after the election, the county is supposed to send cards to all of the people in this category, same-day registrants who didn't have any evidence of being valid voters, to confirm that they are, in fact, real people who do live in the precinct. Well, it turns out that a lot of them are not, but it's too late because we don't have provisional balloting, so their votes have been counted, and there's no way to identify, which ones they were. So that's an example of where an obvious vulnerability in Minnesota's electoral system, so far at least, we've not been able to get it changed because there are political forces in the state who like the fact that we have these obvious vulnerabilities.
Well, that's a big problem. Same-day registration is the same thing, just exactly the same way that you just described in Wisconsin. And after the 2020 election, and the counties are supposed to send the card, but they're also supposed to confirm with the driver's license agency in the Department of Transportation in Wisconsin. They're supposed to confirm that these people are who they said they were. look at their driver's license data or their Social Security, last four their Social Security number. And in a post-2020 study by the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty found that there were 23,000 same-day registrants in the 2020 general election, for whom there was no verification. It either couldn't be verified or the counties didn't verify it. And so that was more than the margin between President Trump and Joe Biden in Wisconsin in 2020. It was about 20,000. And this in one category. You had more potentially illegal votes than the margin. And so that's an ongoing problem in Wisconsin because the same thing happened this time. And it's time that we really looked at these measures. I'll tell you another couple of things. You mentioned voter ID that the public really wants. Here are two more things that every poll shows that citizens really want. They don't want non-citizens voting in U.S. elections. That's like an 85% support issue. That's across every demographic line. People think the ballot should be received no later than the time the polls close on election day. That's a hugely, wildly popular and very common sense matter. And people want the voter rolls to be cleaned on a regular basis. They think that the election offices need to be going through the voter rolls and making sure that the people who are dead are removed, and people who moved are removed, people who were never eligible in the first place because they may have registered at a vacant lot, that those people should be removed. And of course, we've had the big fights with the left over these very basic common sense provisions. So I think it's time that we made sure that those provisions of federal law that keep us from having these election safeguards, I think we've got to get Congress to change those. And so that's one of the things we'll be working on over the next year.
So, Cleta, bottom line, there has been a lot of improvement. And
there has been, absolutely.
There's been a lot of improvement. A lot of people have done some good work, you and many others. And at the same time, we've got a ways to go. There are many areas where we can continue to make our elections more secure. Before I let you go, Cleta, I got to ask you about the one tail end I'm aware of in this year's election. Everything seems to be pretty much buttoned up. Maybe there's a couple of House races out in California. I'm not sure, but the big one is the Pennsylvania Senate race, right, where it appeared that McCormick had a very substantial lead, and various entities called the race for McCormick. But your old friend Mark Elias, the gray eminence of the Democratic Party's election machine, has been out there now for a while, and they have refused to concede that race. What's going on in Pennsylvania? Where do you see that going?
Well, all of you from Minnesota who were around in 2008 need to understand that he is running the exact same play that he ran in 2008 when Norm Coleman, former Senator Norm Coleman from Minnesota, was up for re-election and had won the race. And Al Franken refused to concede. And so what Mark Elias set about to do was to hammer the judiciary and the Secretary of State. And remember George Soros had started his Secretary of State's project, and it helped to elect secretaries of state, leftist secretaries of state, who were more political than administrators. And Minnesota was one of those. And the argument that he made then, which ultimately turned out to be successful and flipped the seat of that. And that's how Al Franken managed to become a U.S. Senator from Minnesota, by saying that all these provisional ballots that had been cast, and people were required to vote a provisional ballot because there was something wrong, their registration didn't show up, or they didn't have the proper identification, or whatever it was. And he kept going, Elias kept going, until he found a judge who ordered that all the provisional ballots had to be counted. And that is exactly what they're trying to do in Pennsylvania right now. It's Mark Elias making the exact same arguments. And just yesterday, one of the election boards in a Democratic county ruled that ballots that had no date, or had the wrong date, or that the signatures didn't match, or there was a problem, that they had to be counted. And that's the argument that they're making all over the state of Pennsylvania. We just have to wonder, is the outcome going to be the same in Pennsylvania in 2024? as it was in Minnesota in 2008. That is the play that Mark Elias is running. So he won it last time. I'm hoping that this time he won't be successful. So maybe he'll put that particular playbook on ice. But it's a federal law that you're not supposed to count a provisional ballot if it does not meet the requirements of the registration in the state. But the Bucks County, Pennsylvania election board didn't seem to agree with that. So we'll see what happens.
Well, they've got a lot more votes to make up this time in Pennsylvania than they did in 2008 in Minnesota.
They do.
So let's hope they can't magically find those ballots. Cleta Mitchell, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure, and we appreciate the great work that you're doing on election integrity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. It's great to be with you.